Everyone keeps handing empaths the same advice. Protect your energy, guard your peace, learn to say no. And every empath nods along because it sounds like wisdom, and then goes right back to answering messages at midnight, absorbing the tension in every room, carrying people who never once asked to be carried. The advice was never the real problem. Boundaries are a technique, and a technique can't free someone who's built their entire identity out of being needed. You can learn to say no and still be the person who leaves a light on in the window for everyone else while sitting alone in the dark. That's what most empaths do. They collect strategies, and underneath the strategies, nothing changes. Carl Jung understood something the boundary crowd never got close to. Real freedom for a deeply sensitive person doesn't arrive through a cleverer method. It arrives through a small number of decisions so large that they quietly reorganize an entire life around them. Jung spent years watching people try to heal others as a way of avoiding themselves. He called it the wounded healer, and he noticed that the most compulsively giving people were almost always running from something they couldn't bear to feel directly. What he saw in those people wasn't weakness, it was a survival strategy that had hardened into a personality. A child who learns to read the emotional weather of a dangerous or unpredictable home doesn't grow up into an adult who happens to be caring. They grow up into an adult who cannot stop scanning, cannot stop absorbing, cannot stop reaching for the light switch to warm up somebody else's darkness. Today, I want to walk you through the 3 decisions Jung's work points to. The 3 choices that actually free an empath, not by teaching them to protect themselves, but by dismantling the identity that made protection necessary in the first place. Each one feels, at first, like a betrayal of who you are, and each one turns out to be the moment you finally start belonging to yourself. The first decision is the decision to disappoint people on purpose, not by accident, not because you slipped up and missed a text, on purpose, with full awareness that someone is going to be let down, and choosing to let them down anyway, because the alternative is disappearing a little more each day. For most empaths, disappointment isn't just uncomfortable, it registers in the body as danger. And Jung would trace that straight back to childhood, because somewhere early on you learned that another person's displeasure wasn't a passing mood you could tolerate. It was a threat. Maybe a parent's disappointment meant withdrawal of love. Maybe it meant an explosion. Maybe it just meant a heavy, punishing silence that filled the house like smoke. Whatever it was, your nervous system filed it away as something to prevent at all costs. So you became fluent in prevention. You learned to sense a shift in someone's tone 3 sentences before they knew they were upset. You learned to adjust, soften, accommodate, offer. You became the person who feels the disappointment coming and moves to intercept it before it lands. And for a while, that made you indispensable. People love someone who never disappoints them. But here's what that costs, and Jung saw this clearly. A person who cannot tolerate disappointing others has handed the steering wheel of their life to everyone around them. Every decision runs through a single filter. Will this upset someone? Your career, your relationships, how you spend a free Saturday, whether you speak up or stay quiet. All of it gets routed through other people's comfort before it ever reaches your own desire. You're not living your life. You're managing everyone's reaction to your life. Think about someone who spent 15 years as the reliable one in their family, the one who hosts, who remembers, who shows up, who smooths things over at every holiday when the old tensions surface. Everyone calls them the glue, and the glue is exhausted, because glue exists to hold other things together, not to have a shape of its own. If they stopped, the whole thing might crack, so they never stop. And they call this love, when a lot of it is fear wearing love's clothing. The decision to disappoint people on purpose is the first crack in that pattern. It's the day you don't host, the day you say, "That doesn't work for me," and offer no explanation, no alternative, no apology to soften the blow. And you feel, physically, like something terrible is about to happen. Your chest tightens, your mind races to fix it. Every instinct you have is screaming at you to reach out and turn the light back on for them. Jung would tell you to stay in that discomfort without acting on it, Because that feeling, that unbearable sense that you've done something wrong by simply having a limit, is the exact place where your freedom is buried. The discomfort isn't a sign you've hurt someone. It's the sound of an old survival program running into a wall for the first time. And something surprising happens when you let people be disappointed in you and don't die from it. You start to see who was actually in relationship with you and who was in relationship with your usefulness. The people who valued you will be annoyed, and they'll adjust, and they'll still love you. The people who only valued what you did for them will react as if you've committed a crime. That reaction is information you could never access while you were still performing. The performance was hiding the truth about your own relationships from you. This is why the decision has to be deliberate. If you only disappoint people by accident, you never get to watch yourself survive it on purpose. You never get to prove to your own nervous system that the danger it's been bracing against for 30 years isn't real anymore. You have to choose it, feel the terror, and let the terror pass without rescuing anyone. That's how the wiring finally starts to change. Jung believed the goal of psychological life was to become a genuine individual, a person whose center of gravity lives inside them rather than scattered across everyone they're trying to please. You cannot become that person while your deepest fear is someone else's frown. The frown has to lose its power, and it only loses its power when you walk straight into it, on purpose, and come out the other side still standing. The second decision is the decision to let yourself be misunderstood. This one cuts deeper, because for an empath, being understood isn't a preference, it's a lifeline. You've spent your whole life understanding everyone else, reading the subtext, feeling the unspoken thing under their words, giving people the most generous interpretation of their behavior. And underneath all that generosity is a quiet, aching hope that if you understand everyone well enough, deeply enough, patiently enough, someone will finally turn around and understand you back. So when you're misunderstood, it doesn't just sting. It threatens the whole arrangement. You over-explain, you clarify. You send the follow-up message that adds 3 paragraphs of context. You replay conversations at 2 in the morning, rewriting your part so the other person would have finally gotten it. You cannot rest while someone out there holds a wrong picture of you in their mind. Jung noticed this compulsion in the people he worked with, though he framed it in terms of the psyche's hunger to be witnessed. And he understood how brutal it is to sit with being seen wrongly. But he also understood something the compulsive explainer never lets themselves learn, that the constant need to correct other people's perceptions is a form of imprisonment. As long as your peace depends on being understood, you've placed your peace in the hands of every person capable of misreading you, which is everyone. Picture the moment it happens. You express something honest, a boundary, a feeling, a need, and the other person hears it completely wrong. They think you're being cold when you were being clear. They think you're angry when you were just tired. They think you're selfish when you were, for once, simply taking up a little space. And you feel the old machinery start up. The urge to explain, to prove, to lay out your reasoning until they finally nod and say, "Ah, now I get it. You're a good person after all." The decision to let yourself be misunderstood is the decision to close your mouth in that moment, to let them hold the wrong picture, to walk away from the conversation with your truth intact and their misreading uncorrected, and to survive the discomfort of being seen as someone you're not. It feels like abandoning yourself. Jung would say it's the opposite. Every time you rush to explain, you're asking the other person to be the final judge of who you are. You're saying, "Your version of me matters more than my own, so let me revise myself until it matches your comfort." The person who can be misunderstood and stay whole has stopped outsourcing their identity. They know who they are, and they no longer require a verdict from the jury. There's a specific freedom that arrives with this one, and it's hard to describe until you felt it. Imagine finally accepting that some people will never get you, not because you failed to explain, but because they're looking through their own filters, their own wounds, their own limited capacity to see. And instead of that feeling like a tragedy, it feels like the end of a war you've been fighting your entire life. You get to lay down the exhausting job of managing your own reputation inside other people's heads. The empath who makes this decision stops being available for endless clarification. They say the true thing once, cleanly, and then they let it land however it lands. If it's misread, that's the other person's work to do, not theirs. And this is where you start to notice how much of your energy was going into a project that was never yours to complete. You were trying to build an accurate version of yourself in minds that had no interest in accuracy. You can finally stop. The light you kept holding up so everyone could see you clearly, you get to bring it back inside and warm your own hands with it. Before we go on to the third decision, I want to say something to you if you've recognized yourself in either of these so far. If you're sitting there feeling that ache of being the one who's always available, always understanding, always keeping a light on for everyone but yourself, that recognition is the beginning of something, and it deserves more than a passing moment. We put together a guide called True Self-Discovery, 24 reflection exercises drawn from Jung's work, built for exactly this kind of turning point. Not to rush you past the discomfort, but to help you sit with it honestly and start hearing what you actually want underneath all the accommodating. The link is right below. And now, the third decision, the one that changes everything. The third decision is the decision to stop waiting for people to become who you need them to be. This is the deepest one, and it's the one that finally frees an empath completely because it releases the fantasy that's been quietly running the whole show. Every empath carries a hidden hope. Somewhere inside is a picture of a person, often a parent, sometimes a partner, sometimes a whole family, becoming at last the person you always needed them to be. The parent who finally sees you, the partner who finally shows up the way you've shown up for them 1,000 times, the friend who finally reciprocates. And you've organized enormous parts of your life around waiting for that transformation. Staying close, staying patient, staying available, because if you left, you might miss the moment they finally change. Jung understood that this waiting isn't laziness or weakness. It's attachment reaching backward in time, trying to complete something that was left unfinished when you were small. The child who didn't get what they needed doesn't stop needing it. They just grow into an adult who keeps returning to the same empty well, lowering the same bucket, certain that this time water will come up. Because the alternative, accepting that the well is dry, that it was always dry, that it may stay dry forever, feels unbearable. Think about someone who calls their parent every week, and every week the conversation leaves them a little emptier than before. The parent talks about themselves, deflects the real questions, offers a coldness where warmth should be. And the person keeps calling, keeps hoping, keeps interpreting the smallest scrap of interest as evidence that the change is coming. They've been doing this for 20 years. They'll tell you they're staying out of love, but a lot of it is a child still standing in the doorway, holding a drawing out, waiting for someone to finally look. The decision to stop waiting is the decision to grieve that fantasy and let it go. Not to hate the person, not to cut them off in a rage, just to see them clearly, as they actually are, with their actual limits, and to stop building your life around a version of them that has never once shown up. It's the quietest, most private funeral you'll ever hold. You bury the imaginary parent, the imaginary partner, the imaginary version of someone who is going to complete you, and you let the real, limited person stand where the fantasy used to be. This is the decision Jung would have recognized as genuine individuation. The moment you stop looking outward for the missing piece and turn, finally, toward yourself. Because here's the thing the waiting was hiding from you. As long as you were waiting for them to become who you needed, you never had to become that for yourself. The fantasy was a kind of comfort. It let you stay a child a little longer, hoping to be rescued, instead of standing up as the adult who could finally give yourself what no one else ever did. And when you make this decision, something extraordinary happens. All the energy that was locked up in waiting comes flooding back to you. The endless hope you poured into people who couldn't hold it, that becomes available for your own life. You stop lowering the bucket into the dry well. You go find water. You build relationships with people who actually have something to give. You become, slowly, the source of the warmth you were always going out into the cold to beg for. It changes how you exist in the world. The empath who stops waiting stops confusing potential with reality. They see people as they are, love them at the level they're actually capable of, and stop trying to squeeze water from stone. And paradoxically, this makes them far less bitter, not more. Because bitterness comes from the gap between what you hoped for and what you got. When you close that gap, when you accept the real person and release the imagined one, the resentment has nowhere left to live. You'll notice how these three decisions build on each other. You have to be able to disappoint people before you can let them be disappointed that you've stopped waiting for them. You have to be willing to be misunderstood before you can walk away from someone who will surely misread your leaving as cruelty. Each decision makes the next one possible. Together, they take apart the entire structure of the wounded healer, the person who kept the light on for everyone else and never once sat inside its warmth themselves. And I want to be honest about the cost, because Jung never pretended this was easy. These decisions will change your relationships. Some connections were built entirely on you being endlessly available, endlessly understanding, endlessly patient with people who gave nothing back. Those connections can't survive the new version of you, and some of them will fall away. There will be a stretch where you feel like you've lost your identity, because in a real sense, you have. The person you were performing is dying, and the person you actually are hasn't fully arrived yet. That in-between place is lonely. People who were comfortable with the old you will tell you you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment. They'll say you've gotten cold, or selfish, or difficult. What they can't see is that you've simply stopped setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. What looks like coldness from the outside is a person finally living at their own temperature. And you'll have to tolerate their disappointment, their misunderstanding, and their disappearance, which is exactly why the first two decisions had to come first. They were training for this. But here is what waits on the other side, and it's the reason Jung believed the whole painful process was worth it. A sensitive person who has made these three decisions doesn't lose their sensitivity. They keep every bit of the depth, the intuition, the capacity to feel what others feel. What they lose is the compulsion. The feeling becomes a gift they can choose to give rather than a faucet stuck permanently open. They can be moved by someone's pain without dropping their own life to fix it. They can understand someone deeply without needing to be understood in return. They can love someone fully without waiting for that love to be earned back. That's what freedom actually looks like for an empath. Not a wall, not a set of scripts about protecting your energy. A person whose warmth